Afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the CDS Lab Research Coordination Network webinar series. And today we have two of our students, Christian and Sabrina, presenting their work on wastewater infrastructure. Michael is going to give our presentation, introducing our speakers. Michael.
Hi, everybody. I'm particularly pleased to be able to introduce Christian Chow and Sabrina Tenteromano because they're two students who are working on a project that I'm co-mentoring along with Professor Hilary Brown of the City College Spitzer School of Architecture. They're both students in the Sustainability Master's Program. And the project represents continuing work in a line of projects that Professor Brown has been sponsoring, coming out of her work in such books as Next Generation Infrastructure and industrial ecology, I guess, ecological infrastructure, excuse me. The first few projects established kind of a conceptual framework for what this new paradigm of wastewater treatment plants would look like. And Christian and Sabrina are part of a four-person team that is exploring, going beyond just the concepts to what it will take to actually realize this vision. What does implementation look like? And that turns out to be a much more difficult problem. The concepts turn out to be pretty easy to articulate, but to put them into practice, much more of a challenge. So they've taken on a large mouthful, but they're well qualified and making good headway in the first half of their project. Sabrina is an arts and communication professional who is interested in shortening the social responses to the climate crisis. So, an admirable career goal here, critical actually. She's been working with various not-for-profits that are linked to the public sector, to New York City and New York State's ambitious climate and equity goals. So, really critical to have communications people picking up and enhancing their technical skills. Applauds to you, Sabrina, for taking this on. Christian Chow is a graduate environmental engineer with his studies focused on hydrologic and hydraulic designs relating especially to wastewater and topics within wastewater, such as combined sewer overflow issues. And he comments that he's committed to engineering sustainable infrastructure that is safe for the environment, saves money, and improves social equity. So again, a timely set of career goals. I'm not sure if we're going to save money or really save carbon at the expense of a lot of money. And some of Christian's work I expect that he will be sharing with you some of his work on just how much money is involved here, because we're really talking about mega projects and things with a very long time horizon. Makes them particularly interesting, particularly difficult to get untracked. So with that, I will turn the floor over to Sabrina and Christian. Welcome.
Thank you, Michael, and good afternoon, everyone. Michael gave us a really great introduction. Today, we're presenting our research to date supporting our project titled Toward a New Paradigm, Implementing Reimagined Coastal Wastewater Infrastructure. We're the third capstone group at the City College of New York, looking at the Jamaica Bay 26th Ward Wastewater Treatment Facility as a site for next generation infrastructure, incorporating advanced circular economy technologies with community benefits. Our group is specifically looking at removing barriers to the implementation of the vision developed by the preceding capstone group. And I'm Sabrina, like we were graciously introduced.
Hi, I'm Christian. So as was mentioned before, our research adds on to the research done by two previous teams, and it reflects DEP's intentions for integrating the 26th ward with the surrounding community. Now, the previous team before us, Team B, has come up with this plant upgrade based on what the community wanted. And so follow along with me as I give you a tour of the proposed plant upgrade. So imagine if you could experience and benefit from everything a wastewater treatment plant can offer. It's a Friday night. You head to the community center here for a concert that's being held for the community by the community. And after the concert, you go to the brewery here for a beer and some food. Imagine if the brewery waste and food waste from this pub was used to power its lights and grow more food. On the weekends, you take a walk across this eco bridge, or to go shopping at the mall that's here, or to jog through the parks here along Jamaica Bay. And the native plants that grow on this bridge and the parks and in the parks got nutrients from this waste too. After you finish eating, you take a walk along this pedestrian walkway, where you see the co-digesters here and the co-digesters that have been added to the plants, and the art that explains how these digesters turn sludge waste from the wastewater treatment plant, along with the brewery and food waste from the pub you were just in, into energy and nutrients. And as you continue across the walkway, you see the plant nursery here that's growing the floating wetland system from the nutrients provided by the co-digesters, adding resiliency to the coast. Passing through the wastewater treatment plants, you see the solar farm that, along with the biogas from the co-digesters, makes it a net zero plant. And at the end, you stop by the food market here, pick up local, fresh, healthy food that's also grown at the urban agriculture facilities here, using nutrients provided by the digesters, closing the nutrient cycle. This is our coastal wastewater infrastructure reimagined.
A wastewater treatment facility utilizes processes like water reuse, energy recovery, and nutrient recovery. By combining water reuse recovery processes, we can inspire community benefits that enhance community wealth, social capital, and resiliency. Mixed use, large scale infrastructure, what can also be called a mega project, is not a new or radical concept. And we're experiencing a pivotal moment in our country where our infrastructure has reached the end of its lifespan. The opportunity to reimagine what wastewater infrastructure can look like and be, a closed loop public campus immediately integrated in its environs, exists and is a once in a generation investment in jobs, health, and resilience, especially as our climate changes and threats to these dimensions increase. Wastewater treatment facilities are generally considered environmental burdens and underutilized industrial zones. However, upgrades or expansions inevitably raise questions of social and environmental justice. A wastewater treatment facility provides a unique opportunity to address both of these issues by providing co-benefits for the community in the form of wealth building strategies, community building and health, coastal and food system resilience. A wastewater treatment facility represents the literal nexus between food, energy, and water, because outputs from water treatment can be funneled into water reuse, methane emissions can be recovered and used to generate energy, and biosolids can be processed as nutrients to grow food. These ideas are all integrated into the vision Christian walked us through on the last slide.
The idea of synthesizing wastewater resource recovery and community is not a radical idea, like Sabrina said, and is visible in Denmark. This $162 million project designed by Henning Larsen serves as a perfect example for the ways in which we can explore the water energy cycles that are fundamental to daily life. As shown in the section drawing at the top, the facility is embedded into the ground, which allows for public access, recreation, and educational programs above. The facility provides recreation and connection to nature, facilitates a connection to how the community uses and reuses natural resources, sparks local conversations on resource use and climate awareness, and creates public appeal around a public utility. In the aerial view in the middle left, we can see the rooftop paths, which give a view over the rest of the park and allows users to traverse the facility. By weaving recreational space into public utilities, the Solar Guard climate successfully sets the tone for community dialogue on resource use and climate awareness, and creates public appeal with municipal infrastructure.
In thinking about shifts towards a more synergistic framework between wastewater resource recovery and community, we needed a way to track our thought processes. We did this through the creation of a conceptual map. We started with our central research question: what are the ways in which we create a synergy between circular economy technologies with existing wastewater infrastructure to produce community wealth and resiliency? Our guiding research began with work done by the previous two teams. Teams A's focus was to demonstrate the ways in which a net zero wastewater recovery facility could be planned. Team B's focus was to weave synergies and co-benefits from the infrastructure into the fabric of the coastal community. To answer our central research question, we determined our method to proceed would be to distill potential barriers into three main socioeconomic elements: planning and institutional, finance and economic, and community integration. We then further isolated our research elements, these barriers, only to eventually research how we might dismantle them into solutions to the implementation of Team B's vision.
Our barriers to implementation consist of complex and overlapping regulations between city agencies, lack of interagency communication methods and approaches, and inconsistent knowledge of circular economy technology by political influencers.
Another barrier to implementation involves community integration. Community opposition due to wastewater treatment plants are viewed as dirty, smelly, and the possibility of gentrification from the upgrade of the site. Multiple actors with their own set of priorities, and a lack of community participation in the project. The lack of understanding between the public and the private sector and current narrative around infrastructure financing that prioritizes mechanisms that perpetuate the problem that it seeks to solve are issues that will need to be overcome as well. So rewriting the narrative to include the community that is expected to receive the benefits of the upgraded infrastructure can help to solve both the financing issue and the issue with community buy-in.
And in addition, economic and financial barriers will include public agencies with budget constraints and the limited amount of capital that is appropriated to them. Fragmented capital in which different agencies allocate parts of their budget to very specific projects, like replacing water pipes, planting trees, which makes it hard to fund multi-purpose projects. And also a lack of public-private partnership experience and the contractual vehicles that these partnerships entail. In order to successfully implement our project, we use the barriers previously mentioned to find potential paths that lead to solutions. First, we need to facilitate communication and improve collaboration between city agencies. And through interagency collaboration and planning approaches, such as scenario-based planning, we can resolve communication inefficiencies between agencies.
The potential paths for community integration involve determining strategies that apply to what the community needs. Based on Community Board 5, which covers the neighborhoods around the wastewater treatment plant, the community expressed a lack of cultural facilities and programs. There is a desire for job training centers, job opportunities, and educational youth programs. Potential solutions such as community benefits agreements and participatory planning would allow for these communities to have a chance to address these issues. The community center this upgrade would also serve as a cultural and arts facility, a space to host sustainability and resiliency workshops, and offer job training opportunities and after-school programs. Just as the plant itself is generating solutions that stand at a convergence, the nexus of food, energy, and water, we can look at the barriers of successful public-private partnerships and community buy-in for a single strategy. By shifting the narrative to one of connection between community and infrastructure, there's the opportunity for financing through people-first public-private partnerships, or PFPPs, using tools like revenue bonds and self-directed IRAs, which are an innovative model still in development, as well as the opportunity for the surrounding communities to gain some equity ownership over the infrastructure in their backyard, like through community solar. And we can use stakeholder engagement frameworks like Envision, bolstered by workshops and art and participatory art, to aid in this shift.
In addition, other funding and financing options would include federal and state grants and could even include Biden's infrastructure plan. Another solution is public-private partnerships, as Sabrina mentioned, that can be used to finance and build major technology upgrades to the plant, as well as provide different avenues of revenue in the form of biogas or biosolids. And finally, communicating with economic institutions will be beneficial in providing an accurate conceptual cost estimate for the project, as well as cash flow models.
So we'll be gathering our research ultimately into a playbook for DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, to encourage they move forward with the upgrade of this plant. Right now, it's still in like a hypothetical stage. So that's our pitch, so to speak. And now we're going to go a little more in depth as to how we arrived at these barriers and solutions via dismantling those barriers.
So our research consisted of investigating various city agencies and their potential to collaborate and communicate with one another. Obviously, a project like of this scale and touching on issues as vast as food, energy, and water, as well as the community, would likely include agencies such as Department of Environmental Conservation, Department of Design and Construction, Sanitation, Parks Department, etc. And DEP, as we said, is interested in this project and will likely need to take the lead in bringing these agencies together. And our team member, Jeremy, investigated DEP and their 10-year capital budget for fiscal years 2020 to 2029, which is $8.3 billion. And their capital allocation for plant upgrades and construction is our main focus, as it gives a rough projection for our capital project. Now, New York State has invested over $11 billion in wastewater infrastructure since 1996. The conservative cost estimate of repairing, replacing, and updating New York's municipal wastewater infrastructure is $36.2 billion over the next 20 years, according to the DEC. And so what we've done is research comparable plant upgrades and the costs to eventually be compiled into a rough conceptual cost estimate and budget estimate plan, which will break down the cost of each component of the project, as well as provide an overall cost for DEP. Now, these dollar amounts highlight the need for interagency pooling, as well as public-private partnerships, because these large dollar amounts you're seeing are outside the normal capital budget numbers. And in addition, while New York State doesn't have any public-private partnership legislation, we still felt it was necessary to highlight the success of public-private partnerships to upgrade other wastewater treatment plants across the country. Through our research, we found that PPPs would best serve as plugins into our mega project. For example, to turn biosolids from the co-digesters into safe, usable nutrient material for urban agriculture would require a separate biosolids facility and equipment, as well as marketing to make it financially viable, and is beyond the scope of what a public agency like DEP should be fully responsible for. And so PPPs would allow this type of infrastructure to be built and operated without public agencies like DEP taking on all the risk and all the responsibility for maintaining these facilities. And we've also identified private businesses that have had experience and success building these specific plant components we need through PPP and examine the contractual agreements and delivery models, as well as funding and revenue streams that this type of partnership would entail. And some of these have been highlighted in this graphic below.
The work we're doing is prior to directly engaging the community, so DEP can be prepared when and if they approach the community, if they decide to move forward. So it's important to understand those communities. The plant is in a relatively diverse set of neighborhoods. East New York is generally industrial and there's no outlet to the bay, and Starrett City is a crucial neighborhood we need to negotiate. The residents of those neighborhoods all have different interests, but all have interests in the coastline and its resilience. Community is literally what people have in common. So our goal is to connect the infrastructure with what the community currently uses and thinks of as theirs. This is why we're placing emphasis on wealth building. When constituents feel they own part of this infrastructure, they should hypothetically support its construction. We've been researching models and potential tools for community-based workshops that will, as part of our set of recommendations to DEP in the playbook, get the community to accept what we're calling small visions around themes that the big vision for the plant upgrade integrates. Engaging the community through public art projects and workshops that touch on topics such as resilience, wastewater, food, and financial literacy should encourage the plant's constituents to accept its development and interest them in the potential job training opportunities and entrepreneurial plugins Christian was touching on, as well as financing through people-first public-private partnerships. Typical PPPs transfer risk, people-first public-private partnerships transfer equity. So in addition to the plant offering job training and opportunities, educational youth programs, and more, the plant will offer wealth building and human value rather than just being a plant that sits in their backyard as a burden. Case studies in our deliverables will support these concepts. In addition to developing a framework for community design input strategies based on investigating current frameworks being employed like Envision, we are relying heavily on art in our strategy for community-based workshops and engagement. The Center for Art and Design's assembly guidelines emphasize that arts and culture should be especially effective in gaining community trust in the planning process, and also suggest that the arts and culture that the site will bring will maintain positive social infrastructure, civic trust, and community stewardship. Their research shows that people who report high levels of access to arts and culture in their community also report higher levels of these characteristics. One of the obstacles that may come with the upgrade to the site is opposition to its expansion. In order to best approach the expansion without opposition, community participation in the planning process is part of the backbone of our recommendations. This can be through the negotiation of advanced community benefits agreements and participatory planning frameworks to engage the community surrounding the 26th ward. A community benefits agreement is a contract between community groups and developers in which developers are to provide specific benefits for the local community. Our partner, Kathy, looked at CBA case studies for successes and failures in an effort to help us wrap our heads around how to properly implement CBAs. Successful CBAs she looked at include the LA Live CBA, which included benefits such as affordable housing, local hiring, and living wages. She also looked at the Pittsburgh CBA and the Kingsbridge Armory New York City CBA. She also looked at failures and lessons learned from two in New York City, the Yankee Stadium and Atlantic Yards CBAs. To further enhance community co-development for this project, participatory planning practices should be applied. Participatory planning aims to prevent conflict between all participants and stakeholders. For this project, it can build trust and community empowerment and also build a base for the community to express their interests and concerns. The following creative participatory planning methods were researched and considered towards this upgrade: the workbench method, extreme experience, and guerrilla gardening. Kathy also looked at the East Bay Municipal Utility District 1, also a wastewater treatment facility, and their successful communication techniques that enhanced a relationship of transparency with the community.
So moving forward with our project, we will be developing concrete suggestions for community wealth building strategies, and also diving into the importance of education to prepare the community for this upgrade and to showcase what can be offered to the community via science, sustainability, resiliency workshops. We would potentially also offer sample workshop curriculum in the deliverable. Next steps for funding and financing will be to create a full conceptual budget estimate for the entire project and figuring out where that money will come from. We will also be identifying key business models and businesses that can be used specific for the 26 board projects and businesses that DEP might want to get in contact with. And lastly, identify relevant planning grants for the projects. We will also be conducting interviews with real estate and engineering professionals and city staff, as well as putting together the playbook.
So thanks to the Research Coordination Network for having us, and thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you both for presenting today. This was a great presentation. I want to see if Professor Babker wants to make any comments. So far, we don't have any questions. If anyone wants to participate, please unmute yourself.
So I'll let silence go for a minute before I comment to see if anyone wants to come forward with a comment. But in that silence, I will say thank you to Sabrina and Christian for a good presentation.
I'm glad you're not giving our presentation yet, Michael.
So if no one has any comments to start off, I'll start off. I want to ask you a little bit more about the money, some big numbers that you put out there. So the $8.3 billion in DEP capital budget, and I think you said for DEC, the state agency, is looking at maybe $36 billion over 20 years. So some very big numbers. Now, these are framed in terms of 10 and 20-year timeframes. So I want to ask you for your thoughts on the phasing, the time involved in moving in this direction, and any thoughts on the phasing and how you bring the community along in a long-term process, how you've thought about that.
Well,
sorry, I didn't start you off with an easy question. Because these plants, go ahead, Christian.
It's going to be tough. I mean, any number in the billions of dollars is not going to go smoothly with any community or even taxpayers for that matter. But I think understanding where these dollar amounts are coming from, and if we can break down the cost of like everything, like what we're doing, breaking down into components, I think the community might understand a little better about the costs associated with this type of project.
The broader communities, because you're seeing these sort of comprehensive projects treating wastewater treatment plants is running in the range of $1 billion to $2 billion. Is that right? From what your case studies have shown?
Yes.
Right. And of course, these are plants with lifetimes of 75 to 100 years. So they're long-term investments.
Yeah.
Sabrina, can you talk about your perception of the consciousness raising process for a community? I mean, we've talked about, I know your project has talked about even starting with curriculum for elementary school students in order to get the consciousness set in a way that can understand what's being discussed here, and how it's different from our current paradigm.
Yeah, that's such a big concept, and it matches up kind of perfectly with the timeline for such a large expenditure. Like these are such large numbers, and this is some project that its timeline is quite long. So it does require us to think small scale in an effort to think largely. So that shift in paradigm, I think, is multi-pronged, and Kathy is looking at how viable it is to sort of work with the community to integrate that curriculum in schools, but also in like after school programs. And there's some other local community stakeholders like the Jamaica Bay Science and Resilience Institute that would be terrific platforms for this curriculum, and offering the community small visions that are interactive, and hence our usage of art. And we have some interesting examples of even wastewater related art projects being used on the community level to introduce these concepts to people. And like we talked about in the presentation, each of these neighborhoods is so diverse, and each of the stakeholders in the community has a different set of priorities, but they have to be interested in the coastline. And with the latest IPCC report, it's become really glaringly obvious that like we need resilience now more than ever, because the effects of climate change are inevitable. So engaging the community with these issues, I mean, it's a challenge, but it's one that I think is, I see as, I'm very hopeful that it's not necessarily easy, but like it's vital, and I think they will take an interest in it. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, you did. That's good. I especially appreciate how the project has moved to integrate art, as you put it, as small ways of getting into people's consciousness about the connection to the coast, the connection to this plant that's in their backyard, the connection to a shift in the way we think about waste. So I really applaud your pushing on that point. It seems like there are other people with questions that are.
Yes, we have one question from David, and then one question from Manpreet.
Yeah, I was just curious if you noticed any like regulatory barriers at the state or federal level that's like kind of making it difficult to implement, these circular economy strategies. You said perceptions is like important too, because there might be the fear of like, oh, like if you reuse this water, it's gonna be full of pathogens, and it's just like they get people sick. Like, what's regulations role in that?
I think in terms of regulations, we're not getting much pushback. It's more from the community that makes it very difficult to reuse water, because there's a lot of perceptions about water reuse and the safety behind water reuse. Because I think the regulations are pretty straightforward, and they're they're pretty strict here in the US. So it's more of like a social aspect that's really a barrier to wastewater reuse.
Christian, I know you also noted the PPP policies in New York State. I don't know if that answers the question also.
Yeah, hi. Great presentation. I would like to ask one question, that how do you see the execution of this great like availability of a large mass of land for agriculture aspect, and then managing the economical aspect also?
How do we see managing the agriculture component with the economic component?
Yeah, and do we have availability for such great land mass in the coming future, where we see development and urbanization going on?
Yeah, so I mean, there is, even if we used every piece of available land in New York City, we still wouldn't, for agriculture, we still wouldn't be able to feed everyone, our entire population. So, the land that the site would offer for urban ag would not be enough to like feed all of the adjacent communities, but the urban, and the idea is to, like, community gardens and urban agriculture are not just there for, of course they're there for food security, to increase food security, but also to educate about food, about nutrition, and about sustainability, and combine all of these elements of the plant with, and the processes that go on there. Like Christian was talking about, the outputs from the brewery can go into the urban agriculture, and the outputs from the restaurant can go to composting. And it also creates an opportunity for organizations like the Green Corps to have another satellite site to operate, and that creates jobs.
Okay, thank you so much.
So I know it's not for me to step in, but I will anyway, because I think, Manpreet, that's a very interesting question, and I think the image, this opening and closing image of the Soldergaard plant in Denmark is perhaps a little a bit of a misdirection. This is an example of it's really an excellent example of burying a plant to create landscape, but it's showing a plant in a wide open space. And I think that may be where Manpreet is coming in, saying, well, our plant is in this dense urban environment, not in this open space. And I think, this is an agricultural setting, but 26th Ward and all of New York City's wastewater treatment plants would really be looking at a different form of agriculture, really an urban adapted vertical agriculture, hydroponic, aquaponic, much more dense, much higher intensity, and not so land intensive. I think that would be the adaptation. And Sabrina's absolutely right. There's really not an intention of providing the food supply for the city, but just some pointer at nutrition. And not without value is to note that almost all of the wastewater treatment plants in New York City, at least, are in food desert neighborhoods, that is lacking in fresh produce. So you're not going to address their total diet, but to address fresh produce is a potential.
Thank you, Michael. I would like to add to your comment that also one other benefits from this type of project is that connecting one activity with another and using the wastes from one as a source or input for another process. This is like what we should be moving towards because of all that we were reading in the climate change report, that we have to find ways to reduce greenhouse gases and so on. So I think this is a great project to showcase how this could be done. We have another comment from Polly Bentley. Polly? She's still, oh, I think that she left. Anyone else? I think that today we are finishing earlier than the usual. Thank you very much. Cecilia, do you have something to add?
I think this is very interesting. The other thing I would like for everybody to think about is the net zero accounting. With all these new designs, besides its cost, sometimes what the regulators will look at is, since the government will look into net zero designs and the city will reach to an aspiration goal of everything it's zero carbon emission. Are there any like accounting available to show the policymakers, this is going to be net zero if we do this, and this is how much it was gonna, so that's something that I would like to ask everybody to think about.
Thank you. I think we are finished. We will be posting this, the recording of this webinar in our website and our LinkedIn page, if anyone wants to ask questions in the future.
I will comment, Cecilia, on your last comment. I mean, you'd like everyone to think about it. You know, these major plant overhauls provide an opportunity to introduce new technologies, and this is kind of buried within the framework, introduce new technologies such as thermal hydrolysis that both increases the anaerobic gas production, renewable gas production, while simultaneously reducing the volume of solids that have to be disposed of, and cogeneration based on the anaerobic gas digestion. So as we heard from Alfred Hebley a few weeks ago, you know, there is the potential for carbon neutrality in these plants. Some advanced plants are reaching that now, but by and large, these plants are far from carbon neutral, and these major refurbishments are an opportunity to move in that direction, and the technologies do exist to get there.
Yeah, and then there's the other gases as well, like methane and that wastewater plants produce.
Well, methane is the principal constituent of the anaerobic, of the biogas, the anaerobic gas produced out of the digester, right? Yeah. I'll get off my soapbox now, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Michael.
So I guess I contradicted your closing of the meeting, Cecilia, so I'll let you close it out again. Just
Sure. Thank you, Sabrina and Christian, for sharing this. I have a little puppy behind, so it's going to be noisy. So thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful Friday. And we are going to have our panel in 2 weeks, and we look forward to having you in our next panel discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Us. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
You too.